All
All right.
right, Coalition Purple. Hey, this has actually been really good timing. We've kind of had fits and starts the last couple of weeks. First, because of me, and then you.
Yeah.
But it was actually good to take a little stop here because I've been trying to figure out how we kind of number our episodes,
Hmm.
and I was trying to do it by seasons. So back in our day, I remember a season being every fall. Then that's when the new season would start for the new TV shows, right?
Yeah,
But these days, with streaming and things like that, you can have like 3, 4 seasons in a year, you know. And
for
so it's
sure.
like we got to the point of okay, we're I hadn't really even been tracking it. Episode 61. So I said, well, that's a good time to start a new season. So this is
Yeah, there you
season
go.
4, episode 1. And then I figured, why not? We can just make up seasons as long as we want them to be anymore. So that's the advantage of this whole new world.
And if I'm being perfectly honest and down to earth, I don't think anyone else is paying attention to the numbering of the issues other than us.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Maybe a
That's
sobering reality, but that I think I have to say is probably the
uh,
case.
yeah. But what's great is you keep doing this, and you could have like 4 or 5 seasons in a year, and you can start saying, "Hey, we've been on for 33 seasons," and it sounds so impressive.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, for me personally, I always just love to be able to add another line to my resume. So if I could say, I've been,
right.
a podcaster now for 33 seasons, you can just throw that in there, and everyone's like, hey, one more line on
Exactly.
the resume. There you go.
Exactly. There you go. So, anyways, well, with all that rest and relaxation we've both had the last 2 weeks, what's been going through your mind?
Well, one thing that's been going through my mind is the sort of the arcane mathematics of redistricting. So I was gonna throw something out here because I've been listening to some of the stuff about redistricting. Obviously, we're in California, so it could be a big deal depending on what Gavin Newsom decides to do. And I'll talk about we can get to the proposal that he's making, the proposition he's putting on the ballot. But the first thing I want to talk about what was going on in Texas because it's kind of confusing but kind of interesting, and there's actually some big issues sort of wrapped up in it that I don't think are getting talked about enough. So the first thing is the census. So in 2020 there's the census, and when the census happens, all the states are supposed to redistrict, and so Texas, like all the other states, including California, drew up a district map. But then in 2021, if I have my dates right, a whole bunch of people, including the Biden administration, sued Texas, saying that their redistricting map was no good. And so that launched a whole series of lawsuits that have been going through the courts. And I think Louisiana was another big one that got caught up in the courts about its redistricting. And so a lot of issues involving how states district themselves has been coming up. And one of the big issues is that people are now beginning to sue, saying that you can't look at race as a criterion for how you set up districts. And so one of the things they keep talking about is the issue with the redistricting they're talking about doing in Texas is that they're going to theoretically get rid of minority majority districts. But what's circulating through the Supreme Court but hasn't actually been ruled on yet is whether or not you can even look at race at all for drawing districts. And if you can't, then the whole minority, majority thing just goes away. Essentially, you can't even consider when we're drawing the districts. But the main reason I bring up the redistricting is because basically Texas has been attempting to draw satisfactory districting lines since the census, right? So, I mean, I think they did have an election where they did use lines that were drawn in something like 2022, but those things are still getting sued. And when Trump came into office, he dropped the DOJ's objections to the districting that was going on in Texas. Obviously, basically anything Biden was doing, Trump came in and took the opposite position. So they let the districting go on in Texas. So the practical upshot of all this is, as far as I can tell, Texas is still confronting the 2020 census in its redistricting, which brings us to California. What Newsom is saying that he wants to do is he wants to redistrict reflexively to what Texas is doing.
Right.
But for all practical intents and purposes, what that would mean is California could simply redistrict anytime it wants for any reason, being completely untethered from the census or anything else. To just say, well, we don't like how things are going this year in the House election, so we're just going to redistrict. And it's like, so that I just kind of wanted to bring that up because I think when we're comparing what Texas is doing, going through all these lawsuits and still being sued in court as we speak, and trying to come up with district lines, and they haven't successfully redistricted since 2020 essentially because they're still being sued by all kinds of people, is a very, very different thing than California just coming along and saying, "Hey, we just want to redistrict so we can gerrymander things."
Yep. Well, I'm glad you brought up because that was actually my top topic as well, was the whole redistricting thing, because I'm this is for any Republicans or Democrats out there that might be listening. This whole thing is just crazy, and next to campaign finance reform, the whole gerrymandering thing is like my second top issue that somehow independents have to get behind, creating some sensibility in this. And I went and looked at, there's what's the name of the site? Let me hold on one sec. I meant to pull up I forget the name of it. I can never remember anything. Is it the Alarm Project, which is a great name? The Alarm
Yeah.
Project that started quite a few years ago. And basically what they did is to take politics out of it, take race out of it, just based on voter numbers and where they split between Republican and Democrat. And if you could magically take those voter rolls and create, in the case of California, it's 52 districts evenly, no consideration but race or anything other than just pure, they're either Republican or Democrat. In California right now, there's 52 seats, 43 are Democrat, and 9 are GOP. Right? If you actually did the math, how it breaks out between Republicans and Democrats, instead of Democrats having 43 in California, they would have 34. And the GOP would have 18, literally twice as many here in California. GOP would have 8, and then you look at Texas, and they have 38 seats. And right now, Democrats have 13, and the GOP has 25. But what it should be is Democrats should have 17, so increase by 4, mm-hmm. and that would reduce Republicans by 4. So it's just like, but regardless of the numbers, it just shows you how ridiculous this has gotten in both red and blue states, and so somehow we have to get this back on track because if right now you can gerrymander, it's perfectly legal to gerrymander as long as it's for political purposes, right? The only question mark, like you said, is if there's any basically racial concerns that were brought up, and that's where most of these things have been overturned. But and for me, it's like, how can you have one without the other, right? It's like, how can it not be racial in many ways, and vice versa? How can it not be political in many ways? So it's like, it'll be a good question to see where the courts kind of ultimately net out on this. I mean, they made it very clear, hey, if you want to just do it for political reasons and you're in power, go for it. But how you can do that without having racial consequences, I don't know. So my only solution to the matter is all that stuff should be thrown out, and we've got to get back to some form of, and again, I think this is very possible with all the technology we have now with GPS and stuff, just make everything as square as possible, regardless of voter rolls, racial stuff. So it's an equal thing. And I think what we would find is we'd have a lot more swing states than we do now.
Yeah, I think things would be a lot better. I think one of the things that got passed many years ago, somewhere along the line, I wish I could recall exactly what it was, but they threw out a lot of districts that weren't continuous. There was like a little chunk over here and a little chunk somewhere else. And so now that's why you get all these really interesting, like kind of like curly Q s looking sea serpenty kind of things, because they have to be contiguous, so they like wrap around.
Right.
You're right
Well,
about.
that's where the term comes from, right? That's where the term comes from a
Yeah,
salamander, and the guy's name who did it, whatever, a governor or whatever, was
yeah.
Gerald or something. Yeah.
And so it's like it's really hard to lay down a set of rules, but I mean, basically, I think the idea of starting with a grid and then modifying that grid as little as possible, because it is based on population, right? Each district is supposed to
Yes.
represent 800,000 people or something at this point. I can't remember exactly what
Yeah. I
it's
think it's
gotten
like
to.
710 or 715, something like
Yeah,
that.
I don't remember off the top of my head, but the idea is you have to have that cube basically encompassing, that number of people. So some of the cubes will be bigger and smaller, and
Yeah.
so. But if you
Yeah.
but if you started with a grid system that just lays down a grid, then a certain number of grid squares would be a district, and that's what it would be.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's very doable. And that actually, I went through Chat GPT and stuff, and basically, it broke Chat GPT. So it says, "Well, we can't do that. We can't create the algorithm, something to the effect, in a grid format because that's not how things are done." But then this alarm project has basically created some kind of computer model that again takes all those factors out of it and makes it basically by population. Yeah. And like you said, if you're out in the rural areas, right, they're always going to be gargantuan in geographic size. And then as you get closer to urban areas, they're going to be much smaller. But the point being that you're not doing it to carve out, hey, let's take this neighborhood in because, it's black or white or whatever. It's just purely geographic based on a grid, and there's a formula for that, and you don't mess with the formula. And whatever comes out is what it is.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
don't know.
If you
Somehow we got to stop this because it's like this is ridiculous. It's getting so ridiculous.
Yeah. But yeah, as far as California's predicament goes, it's going to be interesting too, because for Newsom to achieve what he wants to achieve, he has to supersede the non-partisan districting committee that exists that got voted into existence. I think it was in 2010. And it's funny because I guess Arnold Schwarzenegger now is going to reemerge from somewhere, and because it was the redistricting committee, I believe, came into existence during his
Yeah.
term as governor. And so
Right.
it's like a piece of his signature legislation, essentially, and he doesn't want to see that just get wiped out. So I guess we're going to start hearing from Arnold and a lot of other people talking about, California can't just willy nilly decide to redistrict whenever it wants.
Yeah, and that has been in place for quite some time. And so while it's supposedly independent, how do you get to a number where there's only 9 GOP when realistically it should be twice that number? And I'm not a big proponent of the GOP, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, fair is fair. And it's like if you just take the number of voters or number of population are basically based on their registrations. I mean, frankly, I don't even know where, I mean, Newsom's going to have a trouble. He's trying to come up with 5 additional seats, and there's only 9 to go for.
Right. Well, the thing is that sort of occurred to me is part of the reason that Texas is redistricting in the way it is because in the census it gained seats, so it has to essentially make new districts, and that's where a lot of the controversies comes. Like, how do you make those districts? Where do you make the districts? So forth and so on. And California, though, has had stagnant population or even declining population. So if Newsom wants to redraw the districts, he's got less population to work with. So if you say that you want to take a Republican district of 700,000 people and make it a Democrat one, you got to start shoving Democrat voters into it somehow. But it's still going to reach 800,000. So if you put in 400,000 Democrat votes, then what are you going to do with the 400,000 Republican votes? They got to go somewhere. And as soon as you do that, you're going to flip another district over the Republicans. It's as far as a matter of practicality goes, I'm not sure how much success that Newsom can really have. And the real winner of the gerrymandering contest is Massachusetts, apparently, who has no Republican representation. And so it's like,
How's that possible? You know,
some big threat from Massachusetts, because I think it was Elizabeth Warren who was talking about this, and so she's a senator from Massachusetts, and so it's like, well, what exactly are you going to do in your state to gerrymander anything else? There's not,
right.
It's gerrymandered to the point where it cannot be gerrymandered anymore.
I know. Yeah, and it's crazy. Well, I don't know. I trying to bring it back around to the whole independent thing, because out of all those seats that are kind of questionable, regardless of what side you're on, a bunch of those really are independent voters, because they're, and that's why if we have 3 or 4 or 5 more parties, even more reason to just forget this whole gerrymandering thing, set this up as grids, and let the population fall where it may, and that's, we need to get away from that,
because that's exactly the place that I was going to go next, which is, if you had a third party involved in all of these districts, gerrymandering would be next to impossible. Because you would have this river of independent voters, of which I think is now the largest single group in California are independent voters now, running through every single district. Because
Exactly.
part of the reasons they can do the gerrymandering in California, for instance, is that the urban centers are overwhelmingly Democrat, and the rural areas are overwhelmingly Republican. It's almost, gerrymandering almost does its work for itself, because it's we're kind of, the population is sort of self-segregating.
Yeah,
but if you had a third party that was competitive in uncompetitive, what are now considered uncompetitive districts, and I think especially around the large cities, because that's where the people are, that's where the reform needs to happen, so forth and so on. If you took all those independent people and had a party that represented them, it would just blow apart the gerrymandering completely. It would be next to impossible to do it, because independent voters are everywhere.
Absolutely. Oh, and growing all the time. I mean, it's amazing. Like I said, it is either the first or second largest group of voters here in California, and that's because I know it was really getting close there the last election with Democrats and independents. Republicans are off the, kind of falling off the map.
They don't exist. Yeah.
Right. But, and so I know they're very close, and I think that's the case in a lot of states now. I mean, it's people are so disenfranchised. And it's like, so, now I guess you probably are finding it sad news. I hear that, Elon Musk is not moving forward with his party. Sorry to bring the bad news to you, man.
It probably wouldn't surprise you to hear that people don't usually do the things that I want them to do. But what can you say?
Yeah.
As I say, but you could just take that as an example, though. Like, think about it, if there was a third party, like an America Party, and it was putting up candidates in all these, gerrymandered districts where the congressional election is uncontested. Think about how many races we have in the state of California where it's uncontested. So if you had a third party and its sole goal was to run in areas where, no one is even contesting the election anyway, that would, even if you didn't really win any of them, it would completely turn the politics of the state on its head. Again, Musk has let me down. I can't say that I'm necessarily surprised by that. But at the same time, hope springs eternal. And
that's right.
All we can do is keep putting out the idea and keep saying all the ways that having a third party would fundamentally change everything about our voting system. The financing, the gerrymandering, the partisanship, so many things would be so much better if we had another viable party. So, again, whether the universe will turn in the right direction and that will, come about somehow, and maybe we can have some influence on what people think about having that come about, I don't know, but I'm going to keep saying it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't even see any other way really out of the hole at this point until
Yeah, you
people
know.
get so frustrated. And, I'm kind of, I know it sounds terrible, but I am kind of hoping it does that. It does kind of melt down and people get so frustrated that they're going to realize that neither one of these parties are in their best interests at this point.
They're just
That,
absolutely.
you know, and it's just become such a game. Um, I think we're maybe getting there, and I want to be as optimistic because it's weird to be optimistic about seeing the country kind of go down the tubes for at least some point in time to get you back to where hopefully we've got some common sense going on, but we're
Yeah,
kind of there, you
yeah.
know,
No, as I say, I've always just felt like I think the will of the people is there. There just needs to be something that will can be focused upon so that they can,
galvanize them.
yeah, to galvanize people together to do it. Yeah, one thing that I heard, this is sort of off topic, but I just think it's interesting was there was a Democrat politician talking about, what do the Democrats need to do to, get back into to be running everything. And she was actually talking about cost of living and how cost of living is, so many people are so concerned about cost of living. How often do I talk about cost of living? Like every minute of every day. But the thing is that got me about it is it's so interesting because all the places where cost of living is the highest and the most problematic are all cities run by Democrats. And so it's like, it's interesting that some of the Democrats have sort of caught on to some of our messaging. I mean, you and me, we're really moving the dial now, so the Democrats are listening to us. But anyway, that they're sort of talking that language, but it still needs somebody who actually wants to come in and say, hey, look, they're talking about this, but they're doing exactly the opposite. And so you really do need a party that pushes for reduction in cost of living and is willing to take action to make something like that happen. And again, it's just like it's so tangible and so attainable. But you just need, again, you need a focal point, you need a leader. Unfortunately, you need funding
You do.
to sort of draw people's attention to a particular point and say, okay, now we're going to start running people in uncontested districts, and there's no more free ride back into Congress every year, no matter how badly you screw things up.
Yep. No, no, exactly. Well, and again, I think we're starting to, I'm hearing it more and more in these kind of blue areas where the cost of living has become such a frustration that really is breaking the Democratic Party apart in lots of places, right? And the flip side of that is what's breaking a lot of the Republican Party apart are things like the whole Medicaid and social safety net and stuff like that. Because I think that's getting ready to hit a lot of rural areas that they didn't realize, oh, well, crap, I didn't vote for that. And so maybe between these looming disasters that are right in front of us, that, people will start thinking a little differently about how we want to manage our political system.
Yeah, and it's funny, it's just like just talking about those two things. Here's your party: reduce the cost of living for everyone, save the social program, save Social Security, and save Medicare.
Yeah,
There's a
I
party
know.
political.
I mean, those are the key
What are you
things.
doing, Elon?
You were this close, this close to making it happen, but he probably got distracted with his $29 billion raise he got. So you know,
Yeah,
I can relate.
it's like make a political party, go to Mars. I don't know which one will. It gets confusing after a while. I can see where that could be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. He's only human. Come on. It's, oh gosh. Anyways, but yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, and all of it's very needless. That's the sad
Yeah,
part. It's just
yeah,
so needless. But all the more reason, again, going back to the independent thing, is just we need to start building, continue to build from the ground up. It, and when ground up, literally, I mean, some of the we're going to have some here in Vista city council elections and stuff. Some of the council races that'll be coming up last time were separated by like 30, 40 votes. I mean, people can make an impact at the local level. And And so, got to start there and try and get people to, hey, if it works there, it could work elsewhere if you just think independently, because partisanship doesn't play as much of a role in the local politics. It's really about the potholes and things like that really don't play into the political realm a whole lot, other than let's make sure we're not overspending or that kind of thing. But generally speaking, there's not a lot of politics in it.
Yeah, yeah. As I say, I've dealt with city and county regulations and commissioners and all sorts of government agencies over the years, trying to get things built or fixed or repaired or get permits for things, and it's just part of having a business in California. And you know, anytime you have to deal with the state, it's horrible. County can be okay, cities can be okay, but all things considered, especially for a California city, I'm actually pretty happy at the way Vista is run. I think we actually have some good, conscientious people that, do a pretty good job with our little city. So, kudos to them. And I'll be looking to see who's running next and all that stuff too.
Yeah. Well, and going back to billionaires, since we're beating up on billionaires a little bit, I and California on top of it, I think this. I meant to bring this up a couple weeks ago when I couldn't make it, but I thought it was just almost laughable that the CEO In-N-Out Burger,
Mm-hmm.
you probably read this, is moving
Oh
to
yeah,
Tennessee because
yeah.
it's too hard to live in California, to raise a family in California. And I'm going, really? You do realize California is really major business for the most part, but I mean, I appreciate it. Just the irony of it was so funny. It was
But I
like,
think I was going to say there's a little message sort of in the undercurrent of that, which is something that the California politicians need to start thinking about more and more. And that is maybe we could say it's good or bad, or depending on how much resources you have to raise a family in California or whatever. But one thing that is definitely true is at this point in time, it's really easy for the billionaires to leave. And so
oh,
with
absolutely.
our tax the rich tax policies, and being so dependent on, super industry, Silicon Valley types and things like that, if things continue to get worse and worse in California, especially in relative comparison to the rest of the United States, boy, California is going to find itself in really big trouble really fast if people start to, if those really high earners decide that they're going to go somewhere else. Because that's what California does. Everything is about taxing the rich in California. Oh, we need to build a train that doesn't go anywhere. How are we going to pay for it? Well, we can tax the rich. But if the rich people start saying, "Look, I just don't want to get taxed anymore. I'm going to Tennessee," now you're in real trouble.
Right, right. Well, in all fairness to In-N-Out, because I have frequented them a few times, they're
Oh
not
yeah,
my
I have to.
favorite. Not my favorite, but I have to. I will say I actually have known people who have worked there, and they actually do a great job in terms of supporting their employees and paying, a good wage for that sector of the world, and training. And so I mean, it's an awesome company. It's just an easy one to kind of like, really, you're worried about the cost of living, um, in all fairness, In-N-Out has been actually a pretty good corporate citizen out there
Yeah,
over the
but,
years. So
but
I,
again, that's why it's really a shame for them to leave. You know,
it is
but
totally
but the other thing that's going to be really bad is the refineries. And I know that there's all kinds of environmental issues that people have with refineries, and obviously the gas industry isn't anybody's favorite. But in addition to employing a huge number of people, because of the fuel regulations in California, we have these special blends of gasoline that nobody else uses. And so they were basically, at least this is my understanding, they were mostly made here in California for use in California. And
right.
so when these refineries close down and California is still saying you have to have this special blend of gas that nobody makes and it's going to have to be shipped in from somewhere, that's going to be that's why people are talking about having $12 gallon gas prices,
Right, right.
because it's going to be just an absolute nightmare. And the other part of it is My grandparents lived, my mother's side of the family lived in Long Beach, and my grandfather worked a long time for Union Oil. And so I know all about, the that. Well, I don't know about the industry, but I've known so many people who worked on the oil islands out in like San Pedro and Long Beach Harbor. I've met people that were plumbers and electricians and did all kinds of different things with Union Oil. I mean, the number of jobs that those refinery companies provide in California is mind-boggling. And I mean, Long Beach used to just run on that industry. There was
Oh
all
yeah.
the oil importing and fuel importing and the refining and the storage and the. I mean, it was
Oh
unbelievable. And the idea that that's
yeah.
going to be gone from that part of the country, I mean, it's going to be grim.
Yeah. Well, and as much as California taxes are rich, I mean, they California does unilaterally tax everybody quite a bit when it comes to fuel.
Oh yeah,
So,
oh
I mean,
yeah,
that's not just a tax on the rich folks, man. That's working day people. They're getting pummeled on that right now.
yeah.
It's crazy. And
Well, I
yeah,
think
like I
that
said,
I think I was going to say that I think that one of the biggest things that you could do to help reduce cost of living would be energy cost, because there's some things that it's very difficult for the government to say we're going to have a policy that's going to reduce the cost of this or that. But when it comes to energy, if we had more affordable energy in California and we didn't tax energy as high, that would immediately reduce the cost of basically everything. Because like we always, I go like eggs are now the universal gradient for how things are doing. So we'll talk about the price of eggs again. If you reduce the price of fuel, because there's so many things having to do with fuel that and also having to do with eggs, like transporting eggs, refrigerating eggs, keeping chickens alive, blah blah blah. So if you could reduce the cost of energy universally, you could also end up reducing the cost of eggs. So, and that's where you start to see reductions in cost of living, because now everything suddenly is becoming more and more affordable. And also, if energy costs are less, and you had somebody who wanted to start a restaurant, well, it would be easier for them to start a new business because they wouldn't have to worry so much about the energy costs. It's going to bankrupt them in 6 months because they can't afford to pay their gas and electric bills.
oh,
So
yeah, no, exactly.
focusing on energy and getting the cost of energy down in California, that is a way to reduce everybody's cost of living, and that would be hugely beneficial. But you have to have somebody that's got the will to do that kind of thing, and right now we
I
don't.
know. Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, this is where we need to get third parties up and running to get some common sense into this stuff and figure out, some ways to, collaborate on some more realistic solutions on this stuff because it's not going to happen the way it's set up right now. So, anyways, we'll better leave it there for now. And glad to be back.
Yeah, good to
And
talk to you again. Good to be
yeah,
in what was it, our sixth season already?
depends on how you count it. I'm only up to four, but that's because I've really done a
There you
bad.
go.
Uh, I'm really bad at math in terms of figuring out how many that divides in evenly. So anyway, so I've got us down for we're on our fourth season and the first episode, and we've done six. This will be our 61st episode.
This is
So
the 61st
we
episode.
keep
Well,
plugging.
if you did 12, if you did 12 episodes per season, that would be 60 episodes, 5 seasons. This would be our sixth season if it was 12 episodes per season.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so roughly, we're doing. We could start a new season about every quarter, roughly.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
Why not? All
Yeah.
right. Well, hang in there, and we'll catch up with you next week.
Yep. Good to see you again. Bye.